says preparing to live stream the meeting.
And
we are now live. All right.
I just saw you and I pop up on your Twitch page, and then I got that weird double talking, hearing, and then hearing, and so I closed that.
It's for the best. It's for the best. Hello, everybody. I am Jada, and this is my good friend John. Today we're going to talk about Project 2025 and possibly get into a little bit about the dark Enlightenment, because that goes down another rabbit hole. John, have you read the entire 2025 project?
No, it's something on the order of 1,000 pages. I actually have the PDF in front of me.
I do too.
887 pages.
Jesus, that's nuts.
I haven't read it all. The first chapter is terrifying, and the second chapter is scarier, and then it's just it basically is a blow by blow of this is every department within the executive branch and how we intend to gut it and fill it full of people who will do
the master's bidding.
Yeah. It's framed as what Trump wants, but it's really what the people who will tell Trump what to do want.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of the keys. It's my sense of the background to it is that this is not a new idea. They tried to present this idea to Reagan.
Yeah.
And Reagan was like, I kind of think that I'm going to do what I want, what people elected me to do. And it didn't gain much traction. Some of the ideas did. He got trickle down economics going and all of that. Reagan was responsible for doing some bad things.
Yes, he was.
But he didn't do them in the organized manner that they presented to him.
Yeah.
And since then, I think Bush 1 kind of ran with that. And then Bush 2 was mostly Cheney was just sitting behind him, telling him what to do most of the time.
I am the president.
I used to say, if you watched really carefully when Junior was speaking, you could see Cheney's lips moving just a little bit. Yeah.
His arm twitching.
Yeah. There's just no two ways about it. This is not going to be friendly to anyone who supports Trump. I will try not to be offensive or insulting to anyone who supports Trump, because it's not necessarily your fault. There's
a lot of psychological pressure that's been brought to bear on the Trump phenomenon.
Right. And as much as I don't like listening to him, I get very uptight and anxious trying to listen to him for more than just a few seconds.
The presidential debate was not easy.
Yeah. It's kind of a cross between, I know what he's trying to say, I don't like what he's trying to say, and also my undergrad degree is in English, so I don't like how he's trying to say it.
Yeah. Either. And the fact that there's absolutely no pushback on what he says.
But this was something from the 2016 election that I realized during the course of the election, during kind of the latter days of the election, I had just the whole time in the lead up, I had been kind of going along with everyone else on the left-ish, liberal-ish, call it what you will, everyone who wasn't part of the Republican establishment just going, really?
Yeah.
This guy?
Yeah.
Like this guy, like I understand you can be frustrated, but this guy, can't you see through how does the South come to support a carpetbagger? How is any of that working?
Right.
But
Right.
oh yeah, it was just like it would have made for a fascinating study in like social dynamics, sociology, just like how how was this guy the person who told you what you wanted to hear? And it's not just that he confirmed some of the worst racist tendencies.
Yeah.
I'm and having lived in the South for most of my life, there certainly is racism in the South, but
Yeah.
it's hard. It presents weirdly. I'm not going to get too far off topic. It presents weirdly in terms of most of the people that live in the South and like literally for hundreds of years have relied on people who were not white to keep shit going.
Oh yeah.
That is how things work. So it
Yep.
wasn't that they hated them, it was that they expected them to be there in their proper place.
Yeah, you need to be a servant and not someone with free will. You
Yeah.
need to not act like you're human and you get rights.
Or at least you're on an equal level.
Yeah.
They many successful white Southerners would not think they were being racist to say, oh man, pardon me, that colored guy down at Jimmy's garage, he's a whiz with engines. Oh, you got to take your car to him because he knows what he's doing, doesn't charge much. It's not.
It's the trope of, oh, he's one of the good ones.
Right. They would never think of themselves as, I hate Black people for being Black or something like that.
Yeah.
They don't recognize that. They don't recognize them as equals. But anyways, to go back to that,
yeah,
the appeal of Trump was not just he gave voice to some of the racism that had been unspoken before him.
Yeah.
I was watching Michael Moore, the guy who did Bowling for Columbine, and the documentary filmmaker. And I don't really like a lot of what he has to say. He can be very, very gruff, very off-putting. I really had some objections to how he did his documentaries and journalism and presenting things that were very clearly staged as just being slice of life stuff.
Yeah.
But he started talking about going back to his home in Michigan, specifically around Flint, and listening to the people there who were so frustrated by just the gutting of the American manufacturing base, the loss of jobs, the fact that Flint still can't say we have clean water now. It's 20 years later that they felt so ignored by the Washington elites, the liberals, those the college guys with their degrees. And no shit, I'm one of the college guys with their degrees. I also have a law degree and passed the bar. I'm a practicing lawyer. I've got plenty of letters after my own name, so I can't really excuse myself from it. But that they felt so ignored that when Trump finally spoke to them, even if what he was saying was something that like was really hard to believe, was really hard to credit, the fact that he was speaking to them, the fact that he was just telling,
acknowledge them.
Yeah, That
Yeah.
he was lying to them, but he was saying the jobs are going to come back. He
Yeah.
was kind of saying it in a, I'm going to wave my magic wand and jobs. He wasn't giving a coherent plan or anything like that, but he was saying the jobs are going to come back. You're not going to have to move to California and rebuild a life in a chip manufacturing plant and learn a completely that life will be the way you remember it being
Yeah.
when you thought things were better. That
Make
was the
America
make.
great again, go back to coal
Yeah.
manufacturing and, or
Yep.
coal mining, the dirty manufacturing, all the things. Human beings kind of suck at change,
Yes.
especially social changes. When institutions, buildings look different, it gets sketchy. It's like cats when you're getting ready to move and you're packing your shit in boxes.
They're like, where's the scratching post? What did you do with the scratching post?
Yeah,
There is a scratching post. Yeah.
exactly. And
And
so when things like that shift, it really feels like people are like, wait a minute.
yeah.
It was
Yeah.
good enough for me growing up to chew on toys that had lead in them, but don't come around with here with all that educated woke nonsense.
It was good enough for me, and also a certain aspect of all this change that's coming
Yeah.
is happening to us, not
For the first
happening
time.
with us. Right.
Yes, for the first time.
It's you're gonna change. That's the way of it.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, that once I heard more express that, and that he said that sometime around kind of around this time, July, August, somewhere in there of the 2016.
Yeah.
I looked again and I was like, oh shit,
Well,
Trump is gonna win.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
he
knew I
really
knew he
is.
was gonna win. Like, I mean, once the Democratic Party pulled that shit with Bernie and Hillary, I don't even care why, what. It was a crack big enough, oh, so you wanna run a hated female war hawk that the Republican Party and everybody in Republican politics, or so we're told, has hated her for like ever. It seemed like a bad move. And once that happened, I was like, oh shit, he's gonna take it. And
Yeah,
he fucking did.
and I even at least even while I was being told that all of the polling says Hillary's gonna, we can breathe, Hillary's gonna take it.
Yep.
I was like,
And what that served
nah,
was to make people stay home
yeah,
because they're like, oh, other voters got this.
yeah. They've got it. They've got it, and I don't have to sully my conscience
Yeah.
by voting for someone that I personally dislike,
Yeah.
even if she is the most experienced person to run for the office
Right.
in in probably most of the 20th century. And like, I didn't like her either. I found her abrasive. I found her off-putting. But
Yeah.
I I at least could look beyond that to
Yeah.
say, okay, but she's the only choice that's not ah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
anyways, once part of Donald Trump's support within the party, not the not the workers who believed he might actually speak for them,
Yeah.
but his support within the party was largely it, people who thought that they could use him to control, control him, that he would be
Oh yeah.
easily
They they
controlled, that
they
he's
wanted him to be a puppet, and then they
yeah,
got him in there and were like, holy fuck, nobody can control this guy.
yeah, he's a moron,
Yeah.
but he's not a puppet. He thinks injecting bleach is a good idea.
And I wanna say that he's not necessarily a moron, because he is very canny at advertising and showmanship. I
And
mean, it's really
yeah,
the only reason he's gotten as far as he had. other people are not capable of seeing through the Music Man's bullshit until they've paid for the monorail.
Right.
And then he leaves. And that's exactly what 45 is doing here. It's a bait and switch. If somebody questions him on something, he'll just dodge to something else.
Yeah.
He wants so badly to be a mob boss president. And I honestly think that he thinks that Project 2025 is going to make him Putin,
Yes.
because
That's
I think that Putin has so much compromat on 45 that his only way out is to get elected again. And if he doesn't get elected, then he's useless and all the compromat comes out.
and also at least half of his criminal charges. And yeah, I think you're completely right. It was pretty clear in 2016 that he did it as a marketing stunt.
Oh, yeah.
And then when he got elected, he was like, oh shit, like
Oh, yeah.
I caught the car. What am I
He
gonna
looked stunned when
Yeah,
he was walking across the stage that night. He's like,
yeah,
are you fucking, did somebody misread that? Are you?
yeah. He's the dog that caught the car and has no idea what to do now.
Yeah.
And he stumbled his way through 4 years and did it badly, but the the adulation, the you're special, you're the special now. I mean, the
Savior.
president of the United States
Ugh.
is the special, and they were treating him like a savior and all that. He
Mhm.
got addicted to that,
Well,
and
who would?
also he had
There are
lots of
so many
problems.
people. Yeah, there were so many people who would get addicted to that. I mean,
Yeah,
we're almost programmed for it because of the way that we're socialized from birth.
yes, and I I agree with you. He like he doesn't seem to understand much about book learning and and even like what seemed to be fairly simple social dynamics.
Yeah.
Like the going back to the injecting bleach thing because it's been on my mind for the last day or two. Um,
Yeah.
like he didn't just say, "Hey, well, I heard that the disinfectants and the bleach they can kill it, they can knock it out in like 30 seconds, so maybe we should inject that." And then he looks at Fauci like, "Did I do it good? Do I get a Scooby snack now?"
Yeah.
He didn't understand that his gaffe was so big. It wasn't a galaxy brain moment. It was a oh oh
But
uh,
but
but
I think that he is a special sort of human who has rarely experienced a consequence for the
yes,
way that he has conducted himself throughout the course of his life. And there are plenty of rich people who act like this is a video game that only they are playing in. And so it doesn't matter how many children they enslave and,
right.
in lithium mines.
It's
Yeah.
their world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the one thing that I have to acknowledge because the evidence is undeniable is that he has some kind of canny charisma that I can't define. I'm unable to analyze it, but
Yeah.
even when what he says feels like fingernails down a chalkboard, down my spine,
Yeah.
there are people who respond to it. I don't know why, but
I
there are,
Well,
and he
it's
can play
literally
to that.
yeah, it's literally the cult of personality, 100%. And he stepped right into being a cult leader.
Yep. So, anyways, all of that is some background to I my read on the situation is that all of the Republican leaders, the GOP leadership, the MAGA cult, that thought they could they could use him as a puppet, that thought they could ride his coattails, that he would be easily manipulated, easily controlled, and could bring about the world they wanted, and they succeeded as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, but they didn't succeed with much of the way that government was done. He did a lot of emperor-like proclamations. This is presidential proclamation when he would get everyone around him and he'd pull out the big Sharpie and he'd sign the big Donald Trump, and like he had accomplished something.
Yeah.
Without, it seemed, realizing that you just uh, you could have stood up and declared, my farts smell pretty, and it would have the exact same legal weight as any of these. These policies that you have now peremptorily declared will last exactly as long as you were in office, if they last that long.
Yep.
He couldn't get anything through Congress. Like, the only thing he got through Congress was the tax cut.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, that was disastrous, but every Republican president gets through tax cuts. That was kind of a layup. He couldn't pull the Affordable Care Act. He couldn't get any legislative victories while he was there, which means that nothing would last beyond his time.
Mm-hmm.
And there is another thing that relates to something to touch on later, but even with what he did, even just by running around and issuing royal proclamations, the people who've been in Washington for a long, long time, for decades, who've seen how the sausage is made, who've been behind the scenes, their opinions, especially when Biden finally was declared the winner in 2020, their opinions from everyone I've heard from, and my mom was a Fed. I spent a short amount of time in federal service. I live right outside DC, so know plenty of federal workers.
Yeah.
All of their opinions were, you don't understand how much damage he did to just the infrastructure of how government gets done.
Yep.
Things can't get done. And you may like that you may think there's too much bureaucracy, too much administration, whatever. You may like that he shook up the apple cart, but he was in danger of just completely shattering the way our country works.
Yeah.
And they were generally of the opinion that if he'd gotten a second term, he would have succeeded.
Oh, yeah.
And we'd still be trying to rebuild if we ever could.
Yeah.
That relates more to something later. But Project 2025 came about because none of the GOP leadership, and it's sponsored by the Heritage Foundation, who are the people who are behind every bad idea that Republicans have had. They're the ones pushing for school choice, which is really defunding public schools.
Which was their point all along.
Yes, that is their intent.
Yeah.
And Project 2025 has some of that, but basically they were frustrated by being unable to use Donald Trump effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So when he lost in 2020, they set about, okay, we're going to create a plan so that the next time he or any other Republican president, but they're planning on him, but it will work with any president, any conservative in the Oval Office, to gut all of the administrative safeguards that keep the presidency from being a dictatorship. And basically populating all of the administrative agencies with loyalists who are not, whose primary job description, or basically the rubric that they're hired under, is not, I will do my job fairly for everyone who comes in front of me, but literally, I will do what the president wants.
Yep. Not what the American people want, but what the president wants.
Right. Because that's democracy. Some people voted for the president, so they get to rule. And this is their plan to make sure that they don't miss out on the opportunity next time. And
they're telegraphing way ahead of time. And the fact that nobody mentioned it during the debate, you know, there's not a whole lot of news networks that are openly talking about it. I've seen a couple of cycles, but
right.
Ayanna Pressley really seems to be the, you know, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley really seems to be the, or is she senator?
I don't know, but I could Google it.
Yeah. But I know that I understand that she's at the forefront of getting this as much airtime as possible. And
and it shows somewhat where I get my news from. And it's a lot of leftist thinkers on the YouTubes, and I love when I hear people say like, oh, you'll get more conservative as you get older, because I'm like, I passed half a century and I am the leftist your parents warned you about. I like
Same.
let's seize the means of production.
Yep.
Proletariat rise, overthrow the bourgeoisie. I'm pretty sure there are still some guillotines in the museums. I don't really know that I have the guts to execute someone just for being rich, but it's tempting. But it's, I've been, I try not to stay ignorant, but like I can't watch MSNBC anymore because they seem to be more concerned about getting dunks in on the right, the same way Fox is concerned with getting dunks in on the left.
Yeah, it becomes oh, you heard what you said? What?
Yeah.
And I'm like, could we have discussions of substance instead of this being like a block slap fight?
Right. This is, neither of those are journalism. Just because you're dunking on the people I don't like, that's not actually making me more informed. And like, and I just saw so many videos that were clickbait, like Biden destroys left, and I watch, and it's like, yeah. So at a speech the other day, he said he wasn't in favor of that legislation. That's not destruction.
Yeah.
That's expressing an opinion.
Yeah, that's hyperinflating.
Right. And so I still try to get as many sources of news as possible.
Yeah.
But I tend to consume a lot more super leftist stuff, and leftists, Legia Miller, Bo of the Fifth Column.
Yeah.
And
Bo of the Fifth Column is another really good one.
Yeah. Second Thoughts. He's really, really far left sometimes, but he's not wrong. He just tends to slam it in, let's burn down the whole system.
Yeah.
And like, no, system's broken. I get you, dude. You've got solid points.
Yeah.
Let's wait when we're not all on the edge of a cliff before we start pushing people around.
Yeah.
But anyways, I had been familiar with Project 2025, and as soon as I heard about it, I went and looked up what they had out, and I basically I read their declarations and proclamations, and then
It's just,
yeah, it. But so I saw a poll. I think it may have been uh, Olbermann. Keith Olbermann was reporting on it. He also sometimes goes for the dunk when he should be going for the this is straight news, but
mm,
he tries to make a point of getting the straight news, or at least acknowledging that this is my maybe maybe furthest possible interpretation, but it's a legitimate way to read the thing that I'm reporting.
yeah.
But he said that there was a poll about a month or so ago, between a month and 2 months, where he said like only about a third of American voters have heard of Project 2025 enough to respond affirmatively to a poll saying, yeah, I've heard of Project 2025. And I'm like, 70% is too many people not to know
Yep.
about this.
And
So,
on page 5, it says, in our schools, the question of parental authority over their children's education is a simple one. Schools serve parents, not the other way around. That is, of course, the best argument for universal school choice, a goal all conservatives and conservative presidents must pursue. The noxious next paragraph, the noxious tenets of critical race theory and gender ideology should be exercised from curricula in every public school in the country. These
yep.
theories poison our children, who are being taught, on the one hand, to affirm that the color of their skin fundamentally determines their identity, which it fucking does. You can figure that out with a zip code. And even their moral status, which it does, while on the other hand, they are taught to deny the very creatureliness, whatever the fuck that means, that inheres in being human and consists in accepting the givenness of our nature as men or women. Allowing parents or physicians to reassign the sex of a minor as child abuse and must end. I mean, it's just, it I remember hearing that they're talking about getting rid of the board of the education. They're trying to shut down the public education system through this as well.
They're I don't think they're going so far as to declare that, but yeah, I mean it's all right wing talking points from the top down. The they've taken particular care to try to phrase it in the least um it in the least what's the word I'm looking for, a inflammatory way possible, um
Mm.
because it's uh saying that um the school that freedom is school freedom or freedom of education
Hmm.
is a central building block. That I mean that sounds nice. Everyone can get on board, like, yeah, there's some bad teachers I had and maybe kids shouldn't have had those teachers or something like that. When you listen to it from a self-centered point of view, you're like, yeah, but what they mean is school choice, vouchers,
Oh God,
and
yeah,
taking money out of the public school system to spend on
yeah. They're
kids who
talking.
have just enough extra money to go to an all white school, because that's where the whole voucher system started, was in the 60s when they said Brown versus Board of Education, no, you're going to integrate your schools.
Yep.
And they were like, well, if the church runs the school, you can't make them integrate. Separation of church and state. And you get, and so that was when that push started, was so they could get private parochial segregation schools and still go. And then they want the government to pay for the religion that they're raising their children in, which would be separation, would violate separation of church and state, except they're saying it's freedom. It's freedom. It's not religion, it's freedom. And you can't deny us money for our freedom.
Well, also the Project 2012 calls for Congress to shutter the Federal Department of Education, and it's wanting a top to bottom overhaul of the Department of Justice, particularly curbing its independence and ending FBI efforts to combat the spread of misinformation. Gosh, I wonder why they don't want to combat the spread of misinformation.
The FBI has finally gotten around to actually declaring white supremacy groups as hate groups in America. We need to stop them combating the spread of
I know, right? The Heritage, apparently Associated Press this week reported that the Heritage Foundation provided a $100,000 U.S. grant to a group called the American Accountability Foundation that is investigating the backgrounds and social media posts of federal employees suspected of being hostile to Trump policies. All those people will be fired.
When I went to work for the feds, it was during Trump's tenure.
Seeing that picture in the, like, I would have just having to see that picture every day.
I shuttered my Facebook, and like, Facebook's changed their algorithm. I'm not chasing clicks and shares, but I got to the point that, like, I mean, I'm not saying, oh, it's such a viral influence or anything, but like, I would write political science opinions and get hundreds of people sharing them, just saying, hey, we think you know what you're talking about. And but all of them were anti-Trump. And I was like, I don't want them to do a search and suddenly decide
that you don't get to keep your job because
I don't get to keep my job. And eventually I reclaimed it. Eventually I left the job. But it was a concern for me when it shouldn't have been, but now they're saying it. And also, this is another fun one. The next conservative president must make the institutions of American civil society hard targets for woke culture warriors. Like, they're not even using euphemisms. Woke culture warriors. This starts with deleting the terms sexual orientation, gender identity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, parentheses, DEI, in case you didn't know. Gender equality, gender equity, gender awareness, gender sensitive, abortion, reproductive health, reproductive rights, and any other term used to deprive Americans of their First Amendment rights out of every federal rule, agency, regulation, contract, grant, regulation, and piece of legislation that exists. Technically, the president can't excise terms from legislation. He doesn't have a line item veto. I say he because they've all been he's, although I look forward to a she someday. But he, like, literally, that's not something he can do, but that's what they're declaring must be done. But also, like, we are deleting the term reproductive health or reproductive rights, because our First Amendment rights to call you a slut
and a whore
and a whatever
and a baby killer
are far more important than your right not to die while giving birth.
Exactly.
Or
There's also a notation, pornography, the next paragraph.
yeah,
Pornography manifested today in the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children, for instance,
which is not pornography in any way.
is not a political Gordian knot inextricably binding up disparate claims about free speech, property rights, sexual liberation, and child welfare. That's a fucked up sentence.
Yeah.
It has no claim to First Amendment protection. Its purveyors are child predators and misogynist exploiters of women.
They
They're not.
care about women when they can
Oh, I know,
use,
and they don't care
yeah,
about children either, because every time legislation comes up to protect women and children from predators, the
yeah,
fucking GOP votes against it.
yeah.
Their product is as addictive as any illicit drug and as psychologically destructive as any crime. Pornography should be outlawed. The people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned. So, what that reads to me is pornography will be outlawed unless it's a Southern Baptist strategy or it's an evangelical strategy,
Basically,
where they get the money, where they get to exploit.
the so I took a cyber law class while I was in law school, which was a fairly new field because that was the early aughts, and cyber, but also all media law, whether it be books or video or that fun facts. VHS beat beta
Mm-hmm.
because the producers of pornography chose VHS as the medium that they wanted to distribute because Sony was getting too weird. DVDs were DVDs, but Blu-ray beat out HD DVD, which arguably had some superior aspects, but
Mm-hmm.
Blu-ray beat it out because the all of the porn producers in the valley decided that they were going to put their pornography on Blu-ray, their high def pornography on Blu-ray and not DVD.
You got to catch every little pubic hair. I mean, it's a part of the process,
it is important, or know for sure that it's shaved, and if possible, how many days.
right?
It's
Yeah,
um like so much of of copyright and um copyright and media regulation law has been driven by pornography producers. Like
yeah.
they deserve their own statue, but um and there's
Is it kind
um
of like how Star Trek has influenced science and some of the tablet and some of the tech
um
that's come up?
not not quite as much. There is definitely some of the, yeah, let's, I saw this thing, it looked cool, let's try that. Like multiple camera angle. We
Yeah.
put all 7 cameras onto the DVD so you can flip between. If you don't want to look at her face, you can look at his face, or vice versa. They
Yeah.
a lot of it is, they're the ones that are most likely to push the boundaries because they
Yeah.
also have the most direct cash, uh, content to cash conversion.
Oh yeah, and
Uh,
it's
yeah,
easy. There is always a diet,
there's always someone
always
who
the
needs some
desire for
money
porn. Yep.
and someone who is willing to watch it,
Yep.
and that has been going forever. Also, entertainingly, another side note, the entire enforcement rubric of the FCC,
Yeah.
um, like up to the point of when Justin showed Janet's boob on the Super Bowl,
Yeah.
the law, or rather the policy that determined what the FCC could regulate, was based on a case about George Carlin's 7 words you can't say on television.
Wow.
Because one afternoon, one Sunday afternoon in the 70s, a guy was riding in his convertible with the top down, listening to like some kind of public radio or something like that, where you can get away with a little more because you don't have advertisers to answer to. And he had a son in the seat next to him who was somewhere between 7 and 11 or something like that.
Yeah.
And the NPR or whatever whatever similar thing they were listening to was like, and next we have George Carlin's 7 words you can't say on television, which are famously shit, piss, cunt, fuck, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits.
Yep.
And he just says this over and over. And the guy's like, my child's virgin ears. I mean,
Now I have to educate my child. Fucking me.
Yeah. Right. By the time I was 11, none of those words were new to me. I think my mother introduced me to several of them.
Kids introduce, yeah. I mean, because they hear it from their parents. And so,
yeah,
holy crap, I learned about curse words in school.
Absolutely. And it's basically the furthest they would go. They absolutely would not say, no, that was wrong. You can't play that. What they said was, it's all about context. And 3 p.m. on a Sunday was probably the wrong time to play that. And they held them liable for some amount of damages. But also, the definition of pornography is not and has never been protected by the First Amendment. It simply is not. It never has been. There's hundreds of cases that say pornography is not protected by the First Amendment. So the entire fact that says it has no claim to First Amendment protection, literally no one has ever claimed that it did.
Right. But they're trying to turn it into a First Amendment protection issue.
They're trying to
so
say
that people,
that,
people are like, oh, right.
The issue is that the definition of pornography is it has to appeal to the prurient interest, and prurient basically means horny. It has to appeal to the prurient interests. It has to violate contemporary community standards, and it has to have no redeeming social, educational, political, no merit whatsoever. Like, literally no one could glean any useful information from this. And to institute a criminal prosecution for pornography, you have to define what it is in clear enough terms to make sure that the person who is producing it, marketing it, whatever, knows that they would be violating the law beforehand, which means you have to explicitly define what and how it appeals to the prurient interests, what and how the contemporary community standards are, and what community, that's never been defined, and how it has no educational merit. And like, dating myself, but I already said I was over half a century. So anyways, there was a Night Court episode on forever ago, and it was kind of based on an actual thing that happened, but essentially it was this rookie cop gets like a noise violation complaint, knocks on the door of an apartment, opens it up, and it's basically a childbirth prep class that's showing a woman giving birth. And he's like, I'm offended. I'm arresting all of these people, and all of the pregnant women and their husbands or partners or whatever end up getting dragged into Judge Harry Stone's court. And it was partly a let's make fun of this, but also let's show you how it gets silly, because obviously those are naked lady parts. Yeah, I mean, you can't deny that that's labia and a vulva. You can't ignore that, but obviously it is being presented for educational purposes.
Yeah.
And what is the point where you can't say where you can definitively say, well, that dick and that vagina, or that dick and that butthole, or that vagina and that, or the whatevers, no one can learn possibly anything from it. One of the examples that got brought up in a case was like, if that's the way a father wants to teach his son about the birds and the bees, can we say that that's the wrong answer?
Wow.
And so the other famous quote from a pornography case is a very uptight judge. I don't think he was a SCOTUS judge. I think he was Supreme Court of like in New York or something. I could be getting all of that information wrong, but the quote is the important part. There was a pornography case and he was trying to adjudicate it. And he was like, well, here's the thing about pornography. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. So he just went through and said, well, this is pornography and this is pornography and this is not pornography. But that's a complete violation of you have to be able to tell me what it is. So literally, not only by saying there's a pornography manifested today in the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children, literally none of that's happening. But literally, that is a completely not only bogus but fucked definition of pornography, because if you're teaching children that these are boy parts and these are girl parts and this is what they do, and for now this is your pee-pee hole, but later there might be other things. And then the also very important, which despite talking about science so often throughout this whole document, they don't understand science.
Well,
because gender ideology and all of that, the more we study about what defines a man and a woman, the more we realize that those definitions have never been clear cut. And so many people, and that's not just sophistry. So most of my friends already know this, so I don't often have to explain this, but some people watching this may not. So the point is that's not just sophistry. It's not just you may have the body parts of a boy but feel like a girl. That's it. If you want to define it as penis or vagina, well, lots of people, and I'm not going to dime anyone out, but I know people who are born with both. Sometimes they're born with both and their parents ask for corrective surgery and then never tell them. Or unless they maybe find out or something like that, and that's terrible.
Well, and I think they do it because society is cruel. So instead of adjusting the cruelty of society, we would rather just force you to adhere to these rigid structures so nobody bullies you. Okay?
Oh yeah.
No, it's not fucking okay.
I presume that they're not saying, I'm going to abuse my newborn child. They're thinking, we don't really want this person to have to go through the stress of the first time they have to get naked in the locker room and someone's going to say, hey, you got a dingle, why are you in the girls' locker room, or vice versa, or whatever. But that has never been a 100% clear cut definition. And then, okay, well, determined by genetics, XX or XY, except there's XXX, there's XXY, there's XYY, there's everyone has to have at least one X gene, because otherwise you can't make all the parts that a human needs to form.
Yeah.
But set specifically, the sex chromosomes, X and Y, are one of the few where you can have multiple iteration, more than just two. You
Yeah.
can have multiple iterations of either or both,
Yeah.
and still be viable, and even viable to the point where it's not necessarily where you can't necessarily tell just based on a visual inspection. Frequently there can be issues like if it's XYY or XYYY or something, you end up with a lot of testosterone, so you end up with a lot of issues that tend to mirror anabolic steroid abuse or something. But it's not, you look at them and, well, if you're just going on the penis or vagina rubric, it's they they could have one or the other or both. And but also, they lots of people can and have lived their entire lives without knowing that no one even looks unless they're getting tested for something that requires analysis of chromosomes, and they, oh shit, there's an extra. So we literally don't actually know what percentage of the population does that.
Yeah.
And then there are people who have the chromosomes of XX and XY, just the simple chromosomes of a normal person, but there are various conditions that can produce insensitivity to one or the other sex hormones, which means that, yeah, I hate to reference House because House is so full of shit, but it was actually based uh, on a case that they found in a book somewhere. But it was like this whole thing about this really hot, sexy teenage girl was having problems, and it turned out that the problems were testicular cancer because she was insensitive to the male hormones that her testes were producing.
Mm.
And so, and yeah, I don't want to claim that House is a good scientific resource, but that is a thing that has happened with other people. So
Yeah.
any rubric that you try to apply where you say, I know who's a man and who's a woman, ends up having to be followed up with, and I can't tell you how it is, but I know it when I see it.
And I just and it's infuriating because who cares?
Right.
Who
And
gives
it
a shit
shouldn't.
whether you think I'm a man or a woman? You know, I mean, I exist, and because, and my assumption is because your brain wants to pigeonhole everybody you see, so you don't have to think too fucking hard about the people that you encounter in your life. You don't see them as actual human beings that you want to learn something and get curious about. You want to just go, well, that class of people, I don't want to have anything to do with.
They're invalid, and
They're wrong.
yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't studied this, and I'm not a sociologist, so I'm not in a position to study it. But my sneaking suspicion is that one of the reasons, other than the fascist thing to do, is to look for people that you can identify as other
Yeah.
and blame them for all your problems. So you
Yeah.
have to, so that you have to eradicate them from your society, because that's the source of
Yep.
it's the
Yep.
trans people that are allowing
It's
our
the
children to
Jews. It's
see.
not the fact that
Yeah,
poverty is a policy choice.
right.
You know, it's the violence in the Black community or whatever
Yeah,
bullshit trope you want to throw up to divert from what actually needs to be addressed and fixed.
yes. And I think the other part that plays into that is, we live in a patriarchy, whether some people like to accept that or not. Men have a dominant position,
Yep.
and almost universally successful women are successful because of the ways they emulate traditional masculine roles.
Yep.
Um, but if it's so goddamn good to be a man, and there are people who are born men, present as men, whatever, and whatever your preferred description is, who choose to be a woman or to choose to be non-binary, then that fucks them all the way up. Like, how could you have a penis and say, I don't want a penis? Having a penis is so amazing. And the flip side of that is if you are born a woman, or you present as a woman, or what grew up as a woman, however you view that, and can choose to take on the characteristics and the identity of a man, well, then you're just violating the entire social. That's borrowed glory. You're taking upon you the privilege of penis when it wasn't yours to begin with. And
it's like, how dare women have figured out to get into the penis club? How dare?
And as far as I'm concerned, not that anyone needs a justification to be transgender or non-binary or anything else. No one needs an excuse other than this is how I feel. And fuck you. That's all the justification that's needed. But if any justification were needed, the way we have treated women for like millennia is all the justification I think anyone could possibly need to decide, no, I want to be a boy. Because you have been doing some bullshit forever. I like that. That almost would seem like a no-brainer. And I'm not trying to say that anyone is doing it for that reason. I know, I know too many people. I fully understand how actual transitioning and gender identity and coming to terms with your gender expression and all of that works. So I'm not saying that anyone's doing it for that, but that would, if anyone even needed a justification, that would be all that I think it would take. It's just like, oh,
I get to jump out of my caste and go up the ladder by,
I have a tool with which to break the glass ceiling.
Exactly. Hang on. I have to hit the bathroom.
Go for it.
Continue talking though.
Okay. I'm going to continue talking. Yet another quote from just literally the first, this is starting on page 4-ish. But basically, first paragraph of the the website is project2025.org. The actual writings are known both as the mandate for leadership and the presidential transition plan. So any of those are all referring to Project 2025. But regarding Roe v. Wade, which Republicans have been learning is was again, they're the dog that caught the car. They overturned Roe v. Wade and found out how many people are not happy about it. But they make 4 promises just in the first chapter. And the bottom of promise 1, and just to point out, the name of promise 1 is restore the family as the centerpiece of American life and protect our children. And it has a bunch of just complete horse shit about families need fathers, and 40% of all children are born to unmarried mothers, including more than 70% of Black children. Fatherlessness is one of the principal sources of American poverty, crime, mental illness, teen suicide.
And stop having cops murder them in the fucking street, man.
Right. And that all assumes that it's not your parent or father who's abusing you, or husband. And that happens so fucking often.
Well,
I
that's trauma. It's the gift that
Yeah,
keeps on giving. You get traumatized, and so you learn a whole bunch of reactions to try to survive that trauma, and then you don't unlearn them and therefore carry the trauma through your life, traumatizing other people.
yep. And I absolutely guarantee you, and I've known conservative criminal defense attorneys, um, but you don't work as a criminal defense attorney, especially not a criminal defense attorney taking court appointed cases, which I did for 10 fucking years.
Oh man.
Um, and am looking at going back to, because I kind of miss that there are some people I actually get to help,
Yeah.
but you don't do that and think that all families are good. Families are usually, and not always, but probably more often than not, families are the original source of trauma.
Yep.
And so the idea that all anyone needs to have a good, happy life is a marriage is fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
And
I can't
yeah,
even, I have known so many friends who were sexually assaulted as children by their parents or by somebody in their church. And they were told by their parents to keep it quiet because he's a good man and he does good work in the community.
he's a good man who raped a child.
Exactly.
I, I, I,
Yep. Yep.
I, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just,
No,
that one
that's
does not.
okay. That's
Yeah,
I get the same, I get there too.
yeah,
It gets, so that you'll forgive.
right.
Okay, but it's who
But
um
he
it's
prays next to the pastor, so
yeah,
obviously he's
it's amazing how much abuse is out there and how many people just look past it.
yeah.
I mean, it's
And I will state this disclaimer. I I am not a Christian. I am not anti-Christian. I was raised Christian. There can be good things to be found
yeah,
in the teachings of Jesus, just like there can be good things to be found in the teachings of most faith leaders throughout history. In
yeah,
fact, if you look closely, you'll find a lot of similarities. Like a lot of what Jesus said was also said by Socrates and was also said by Confucius in some very similar ways. And that does not mean that I think any of them were cribbing from each other. I just think they all had some good ideas, assuming that any of them are historically, in fact, true, which
yeah,
I'm not going to weigh in on at this point. But I think there's some evidence that at least some of them were.
yeah,
Um, but, anyways, so I'm not shitting on Christianity. I am shitting on organized Christianity because churches abuse a lot, but that is not down to the individual faith. That's down to the power structures.
well, I mean, you look at the abuse rate and you look at the sexual assault rate and how many on the RAIN website it says every 68 seconds an American is sexually assaulted, and every 9 minutes that victim is a child. Meanwhile, only 25 out of every 1,000 perpetrators will end up in prison, and
Oh yeah,
consistently the GOP shoots down any legislation that would hold these people accountable for what they do.
I have listened to too many women throughout my life, starting when I was too young to understand it, and including members of my own family,
Yeah.
um, talk about what happened to them to believe that anyone has any clue what the real numbers on sexual assault are in
Yeah.
this country.
It is such a point of shame and guilt and disgust that nobody wants to talk about it. I mean, shocker, when you do, people shit on you. I mean, your community shits on you, your family shits on you. I mean, you could lose your job for, claiming false harassment or false assault. It's just it's appalling.
Yeah.
And the conservative talking points tell me that they don't care. They don't care.
No.
They know exactly what's happening. They understand that women and children are being trafficked and are being assaulted, and they don't care as long as they keep getting their paychecks and they can have their yachts and, you know, they're not inconvenienced.
I was going to reference again that this is the bottom of that first promise.
Yeah.
The second promise, which is dismantle the administrative state and return self-governance to the American people. This is states' rights in fancier language.
Oh, yeah.
This is,
Oh,
if
yeah.
my state says I can enslave a black person, then I can enslave a black person, and the federal government can't interfere with it. But
Oh, yeah.
you know, finally, conservatives should gratefully celebrate the greatest pro-family win in a generation, overturning Roe v. Wade, a decision that for 5 decades made a mockery of our Constitution and facilitated the deaths of tens of millions of unborn children. They're called fetuses. And they were never alive, so they can't be dead.
Yeah. But I mean, this is the same group of people who sent missionaries to Uganda and various parts of Africa to make sure that the locals started killing and just murdering LGBTQIA people. Like,
right.
I call bullshit on them giving shit about anybody.
No, they care about, again, my sense,
Sure.
I'm not inside any of their individual heads, but it seems that they care far more about putting numbers on the board, and specifically the numbers that they choose. How many fetuses passed through the birth canal and drew that first breath?
Yeah.
If they did, that's another number on the board.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that actual reproductive care is far more important about getting the wanted babies. There are far more wanted babies who don't live to be delivered because of poor maternal care and maternal care that's not available than there are unwanted babies whose pregnancies are terminated by the mom.
Yep.
So if you really cared, even if it were really just about numbers, you'd address it differently. But
well, you'd also provide a social safety net for single mothers, you know, people in hard situations. If you actually
make sure that the baby's got food, even if like mom, even if you just want to say mom can starve, but the baby gets fed.
Yeah.
Fake it. Pretend you actually practice what you preach.
Yep.
But that's welfare moms. Reagan warned us about them. That's yeah.
Have you heard about the idea of the dark Enlightenment?
I had not until you mentioned it, and then I started looking up and reading up on it, and it seems to me that it's almost like Ayn Rand and Thomas Malthus got together and had a terrible, terrible baby. That it's just like social Darwinism in a death match.
Democracy leads to the zombie apocalypse.
Yeah.
That
it needs to be a whole thing of just people duking it out and only the strong survive. And if you're weak, you never deserve to live anyways.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just fucking terrifying. And both based on how it's described and obviously based on how it gets presented. One, even if they're actually super racist, they won't phrase it in explicitly racist terms.
Yeah.
They'll talk about, well, we're not using IQ tests anymore.
Yeah.
Well, that's because
we're all genetically different.
Right. That's because IQ tests have been demonstrated to not if IQ tests actually measured intelligence, then studying for them could not improve your score.
Thank you.
So,
That's
but
more of an aptitude,
yeah,
you know?
that's how much exposure have you had to these concepts? And
Yeah,
if it's about exposure to the concepts, then it's a testing your environment, not your intellect. And
exactly.
that I have a whole separate rant on intelligence that could probably take an hour or two. Also, it started with the super condensed version. It started with someone recommending to me the book Gödel, Escher, and Bach, An Eternal Golden Braid, back in the 90s. It's a phenomenal book. It's by Douglas Hofstadter, who is a professor of I think mathematics or computer science at University of Indiana. And it was written in the 70s. It was a treatise on artificial intelligence.
Mm.
And he said, here's a thought. Let's try to define what intelligence is before we try to figure out how to fake it.
Mm.
And then there's like 1,000 pages of sometimes like incredibly, almost mind-numbingly detailed mathematics, but it's not complex math. You don't have to know trigonometry, you don't have to know calculus, you don't have to know any of that. It's essentially presenting Kurt Gödel's theory of incompleteness, which is a huge mouthful. I didn't know what it was either. But Kurt Gödel's theory of incompleteness also goes back to the beginning of the 20th century when Bertrand Russell and Whitehead, maybe Alfred Whitehead, but it was Russell and Whitehead. And in high school, I had to do a presentation on Bertrand Russell. So that piqued my interest. They had this idea that mathematics could do anything. Mathematics was so pure and so perfect and so pristine that it had to be God's ultimate creation. And if you knew the right equations and you knew the right information, and this was a lot more about logical proofs, like geometry type math as opposed to algebraic type math.
Yeah.
If A is congruent to B is congruent to C, then triangle ABC, etc. That if you work from these theorems, then you will always get, and your theorems are right, then you will always get the right answer. And they wanted to believe that if you had the entire body of math and you could feed in the right true initial postulates, you could always produce a true answer. And the only problem with it was we just hadn't figured out quite how to math hard enough yet, but it was there. It was right there, and it would be perfect. And they, and basically so Star Trek, computer, I am lying. And the computer says, well, but if you're lying about lying, then you're telling the truth. But if you're telling the truth about lying, then you're lying. And the computer goes off and the blue smoke of death pours out.
Error,
and all of that shit.
error. Yeah.
It does not compute.
No, Mad, no.
Yeah. Russell and Whitehead said, well, very obviously, it is just impossible to make a self-referential statement ever. You just can't do it. If you think you're making a self-referential statement, what you're actually doing is making a meta statement. You're not talking about the statement you're making there. You're talking about the properties of like you making the statement or something like that. So everything had a meta level and a meta level, and because you can always say I am lying, but you couldn't actually be lying about lying. So you had to, you were talking about like the entire soliloquy is a lie, but that particular phrase isn't, or something like that.
Yeah.
That there had to be levels, layers, because if you could refer to the thing itself, then you can make a statement that breaks math.
Yeah.
And that stood for a long time. It was clunky and uncomfortable because very obviously people just started like, how high does it get?
It's
Well,
like, that's a lot.
yeah, like, well, it's turtles all the way down. It gets as high as you need. It just never stops. And like
Yeah.
they had a sense that there was something wrong with it, but no one could explain how until Kurt Gödel came along, and he basically said any sufficiently powerful mathematical system, like you could create a brand new mathematical system, if it's sufficiently powerful, if it can do the things that you want it to do, it will always be able to make a self-referential statement. And his proof was probably longer than that 1,000-page book, and was all super high level mathematics. Like Goodwill Hunting might have been able to do it, but I certainly am not.
Yeah.
So, but
And me, algebra hard. Oh no.
but Gödel, Escher, and Bach, that book, Escher, MC Escher, he did, you know who Escher is. He does all the weird stuff,
Yeah.
the weird pictures, like the endlessly rising staircase and stuff like that. Bach did the same kind of stuff with music, apparently. I'm not enough of a music theoretician to speak intelligently on it, but I have been shown evidence that tells me that this is accurate, that you can write a piece of music that literally reads the same backwards and forwards, or that you could just, if you could physically remove the bar from the page, flip it over.
Yeah.
It's, and the low D becomes a high C or something like that. And but that you can write a palindrome in music, or you can write, and he did this, like an endlessly rising piece of music, that it starts out in one register, modulates through modulates through seven the seven chords or whatever, and ends up ending with the same lines one octave higher.
Yeah.
And then theory could do that forever.
Infinitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Hofstadter uses all of these ideas to basically grab, outfit you in a harness, grab you by the back of the harness, run you up to the edge of the cliff that Russell and Whitehead built, and throw you off, and is like, do you get what Gödel was saying now?
Yeah.
And you kind of go, I do. Oh. And then he goes on to theorize about what he actually thinks intelligence is. This is one of the reasons why I believe that the current large language models are not only insulting to so many things all around, but are nowhere near actual intelligence, because they haven't stepped through what he does. But in starting where he did, of trying to define what intelligence is,
yeah,
he established conclusively that no one fucking knows what intelligence is. Like, basically just everyone kind of agrees, like, yeah, I'm pretty sure some people are smarter than others, but I also think that some people are really smart at some things and dumb at others, and some people are kind of middle of the road. Like, there are separate categories of intelligence, spatial relations.
I'm hesitant to use the word dumb. It's more of an ability, right? Because I do not have an ability with math. Now, maybe this is because I wasn't taught right, but I don't connect to math the way I do with music or art. And I think everybody has a specific way of connecting to the things that they're capable of connecting to.
Saying it as smart and dumb is oversimplifying and kind of making the same mistakes of the past. But
Yeah, yeah.
they, it, the current, um, and I actually have a friend, and I actually have several friends, but I have one friend who
You
was
have more
going,
than several
yeah,
friends.
who was going to grad school um, for psych, and we were chatting, and they were like, "Yeah, I really I need to study some homework," and I'm like, "Oh, what are the assignments?" And oh, well, in statistics of psychology, we've got today's unit is on measuring intelligence, and I'm like, "Oh, you can BS that easily." They're like, "Wait, how am I going to BS a graduate level statistics of psychology course?" They're like, "Well, first off, the way you BS any course, kids, listen carefully because this is true. If your teacher cares about class participation, it's rare that everyone in class will get a chance to participate every day. But if you can jump in on one of the early questions and say something remotely salient, they will consider that you've done the reading, you know what you're talking about, and not worry about you for the rest of the class period. I don't recommend doing that all the time, but if you ever just had a really bad night and like you could jump in and knock out an easy question with alacrity early, and you're solid for that period. But also, no one knows what intelligence is. The best theory is that there are multiple categories of intelligence, and kind of everyone has their own ranking, both inherently and to some degree based on practice within each of those. So spatial relations, mathematics,
Yeah. Because there are so many
algebra
different
versus,
kinds of
yeah,
intelligence. Yeah.
exactly. And that, so yeah, but no one even agrees exactly how many there are or what a
Yeah.
good scale is for ranking them. They just kind of all say, um, again, I can't define what it is, but I
But
know
I
it when
know
I
when I
see it.
see it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so, anyways, yeah, the IQs and stuff are complete BS. It's just, but I also really appreciated that the next time I talked to that person, I was like, "So, how'd you do in your class?" Like, man, shut up.
Ah,
Uh,
nice.
so
Nice.
yeah, but that's the kind of world that the Heritage Foundation, that Project 2025, and the Dark Enlightenment. That's the world they believe in. Is that people can be objectively ranked on a scale,
Yeah.
and then that merit can be quantified, rewarded, it placed, and the thing that they never acknowledge, but which must be true if you're honest in a system like that, is some people will rank lowly.
Yeah.
And if you're saying that their compensation, their anything gets determined by that merit that they were born with, you're saying that some people just don't deserve to make it.
Yep.
And make it may include just surviving.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
that's not an acceptable world.
No, it is not.
That if you're okay with just, some people got to die,
Some people
and
they just gotta suffer. That's
Yeah.
why they're here. They got to get raped. They got to get killed. It's just the nature of the beast. Kids in school have to get shot because you got to be careful. Motherfucker, please.
And yeah, and the that's their version of social Darwinism, but it's just a bleak place.
Oh yeah,
Like
it's
there's
like I and this may be unfair, but I tend to picture a lot of the people who are married to this bullshit as the people that are just hunkered down waiting for the zombie apocalypse so they can do all the shitty dickheaded things that they want and not get called on it and not have any consequences.
I a actually the partner of the person that I was just talking about
Yeah.
um, happens to be in law enforcement and really, really wants to be done with that at this point. Um,
Yeah.
has seen ha, has demonstrably fought for the best possible version of being a law enforcement officer while also clearly has reached the understanding that the system has problems that may not be fixable. But anyways,
Yeah. Well,
uh,
I mean, it is immensely frustrating that there are so many pillars in place to protect people who are abusive
oh yeah, there's
in a
it,
variety of fields.
it is literally law is there to protect power.
Yep.
And for the most part, power is money and property, but those are ways of measuring power. So
Yeah.
you know whose is longer because you had because of how many zeros their bank account says.
Yeah. Well, and
But it's
they also play the social game.
yeah,
They stay within the you're rich now, so this is what we talk about, and you don't veer beyond that.
yeah, and I I also happen to think that's a large portion of. I don't think that the people presenting Project 2025 are doing so in good faith. I don't think they really believe that this is going to make a new world order that's just better for everyone.
Oh yeah.
I but I believe that that's the image that they're trying to present, and I believe a lot of people will take them at their word.
Yeah. That's what
Which
scares
is
me.
why I think we need to teach critical, not only public education, but we need so much critical thinking education that like we need to teach kids how to think critically about everything. I had the good fortune of having a history professor who taught us this lesson my freshman year of high school, and it has probably served me better than anything else I've learned in my life. Like he gave us he gave us an excerpt about. I'm getting distracted, but this is kind of important. He gave us an excerpt about um, that someone was writing about why did Rome fall? What was the reason for the fall of the Roman Empire?
Mm.
Well, the reason for the fall of the Roman Empire was that when the Huns invaded, Rome had no Romans. Rome was full of Greeks and Persians and all of these other people, and there were no true Romans
Mm.
in Rome when the Huns finally made it over the mountains. And he didn't preface it. He wasn't like, so I'm going to give you something and it's full of shit. He was just like, so read this. Okay, let's talk about it. Like any other kind of normal discussion. And finally I was like, wait a second. You know, over the last month and a half of history class, you've told us that uh, Rome based, at least in the early days, based their legionnaire training, and they were horribly effective legionnaires, legionary army.
that they based it on the phalanxes that were originated by the Greeks, where everyone stood shield to shield and had a spear to poke beyond, and basically ended up making a turtle on the battlefield that was very, very difficult to get through. And then there were ranks behind them prepared to take the place of anyone who fought. And certainly Rome adapted it. They made it into smaller, more mobile groups, so that you didn't have to have, a half a mile long line. You could have 120 people who can move around, get here and there. But that was the basis. And I'm like, so yeah, the entire basis of their military tactics was learned from the Greeks. So where does, along with most of their culture, where does he get off saying
immigrants are the problem?
Yeah. Those damn Greeks, immigrants are the problem. Yep. and he was like, yep, that's a good point. And more people started kind of picking more and more holes. And he's like, yeah, so now let me give you the citation. This was written by a German scholar in 1939, who was saying immigrants and blood poisoners are the reasons why Rome fell, and Germany just happens to. And he's like, yeah, you should always look for primary sources. You should always look for secondary sources. It's fine to also look at tertiary sources and things like that to get an overview. Very frequently, those can direct you to primary and secondary sources. It's important to look at sources.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you have to believe them.
Yep.
You can also apply critical thinking to what they're saying. If they're saying, hey, there's a Hun army outside the gates, you could probably take them at their word about the Hun army. If they're like a merchant, probably shouldn't take them at their word as to what the military tactics were that lost the battle.
Yep.
Maybe that's not their expertise. Like, oh, like people can write shit even on the internet and it's not true. That is one of the strongest lessons that I learned throughout all of my regular school, and that was public fucking education.
That's fantastic. Go that teacher. That's amazing. Holy crap, we've been talking for almost 2 hours.
Yes, we have.
I'm sure there's plenty more, but we can always try another ep and revisit if you want.
I will always have stuff to talk about, but yeah, the short recap is you should very much, anyone listening should very much familiarize themselves with Project 2025 because it's really scary.
Yes.
It lays out a plan for how, when the next, and it literally says at one point, the next conservative president will be inaugurated January 20, 2025.
Yep.
They're not even like maybe kind of questioning about it. They say that it will happen, and that once he takes office, they don't intend for any other party to be able to take office forever. Yep. Like they're talking about the sort of things where not necessarily suspending the Constitution, although it's hard to see how some of them
that's in the back
would stop
pocket,
it.
sure. Yeah.
But that but that, like, yeah, we can control who can vote. We can control who we kick out. We can suspend birthright citizenship and decide that, hey, you look kind of Mexican. You were never a citizen to begin with. It doesn't matter if you were born in East LA. As like we can they talk about democracy, but they want a democracy where they get to pick their voters. not the people that live in the society pick their representatives.
Yeah. And if you think
yeah.
any of this is bullshit, look up redlining. And also, look up all the things that the GOP has been doing to try to disenfranchise voters that aren't white men.
Oh yeah. There's one polling location for 600,000 people in a predominantly Black neighborhood.
Yep.
Okay. One last thing, because I just remembered it, and but it goes back to something earlier. Speaking of redlining and demographic makeups of cities and all that, and Brown versus Board of Education and segregation schools, and you have to desegregate the schools, and when, and I don't have the names off the top of my head, but the story, Jean, I don't remember his last name, but the Black guy that was sitting at home in his apartment, and the white lady cop opened a door, saw a Black guy in what she thought was her apartment,
and just started shooting.
And started shooting. And like that whole incident got covered badly on a lot of things. Like, I don't believe there are many, if any, police that just go out saying, I'm gonna shoot myself a Black man today.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen with any cop I know. Even the worst ones, that gets weeded out. But what does happen is they've seen all of the movies that we've seen, and the Boys in the Hood and all of the other stuff, where the guy that's going to suddenly turn something violent is a young Black man in
black skin is seen.
Yeah.
Black skin is seen as a weapon by default by the police.
Right. So their reasonable reactions can be to overreact. So I don't actually think she was out. Lots of people said there's no way someone could make a mistake like that. You can make some really dumb mistakes. But the point that got made in her trial, someone that they had witnesses saying, she was at a basketball game supporting the Black school earlier that night. She's not racist. She was there supporting the Black school. And I wanted to say,
she has a Black friend.
Right. Yeah. I wanted to say, we're more than 50 years past Brown versus Board of Education. How the fuck was there a Black school?
Yeah.
Because, we're not being racist. We're just populating it with the people who live in this neighborhood. And all the people in this neighborhood just happen to have Black skin because that's where we dumped them all in the 50s and 60s and forced them to live. How can you claim that racism is dead?
Oh yeah, when it's, I mean, it. So I believe I don't want to mention the name of the officer, but the guy was Botham Jean, 26-year-old.
I knew Jean was.
He was Black and unarmed, shot while watching TV and eating a bowl of ice cream. Real threatening.
Yeah, it's.
Them Black folks, what they can do with ice cream. Woo!
If you're not programmed to see Black skin as a threat, that would never have happened.
Yep.
So, anyways, this has been a delightful conversation.
Yes, thank you so much. I very much enjoyed it. I look forward to doing this with you again sometime.
All right. Yeah. You take care. And anyone who's watching or watches later or whatever, have a great day, have a great weekend, have a great 4th, keep all your fingers.
Please don't put fireworks in your pants.
No.
Like the Roman candle thing that shows up every year, that's not something you need to try out.
No.
Really not.
Roman candles can go very wrong. Please don't test it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't try to put them out by shoving them in the dirt because
Or with your face.
Yeah.
You know, just, oh my God, be smart. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for joining.